one. As the call for evacuations go out in the Florida Panhandle, residents are beginning to board up in preparation for Hurricane George. Good morning and welcome to the Weather Center. I'm Will Annan. We're keeping an eye on Hurricane George this morning and the possibility of more severe weather across the Midwest and also the northern Great Lakes. But first, an update on George. Right now, the hurricane is making its way through the Gulf of Mexico, and some residents along the Gulf are taking no chances on which way they think the storm may be headed. For the very latest in the storm's direction, we turn to Bruce Edwards and Dr. Steve Lyons. They are standing by in the forecast center.
Thanks, Weather Will, and good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this Saturday as we're now, again, as Will mentioned, watching Hurricane George to see where it is headed and who will be the next area of the coast that will be facing the wrath of George. Dr. Steve Lyons joins us again, and we were watching this system and noticed very early this morning it got a little ragged looking after it came through the islands, but now it seems like it's starting to get revitalized.
It sure does, and looking at we classify the intensity of tropical cyclones from satellite imagery. There's a technique called the Dvorak technique. I just did that a few minutes ago, and it looks like it's about a T5, which would equate to about a 105-mile-an-hour hurricane, which is exactly what the Hurricane Center's got. But if it gets a little bit more, it'll be a 5.5, which would be a major hurricane, 102 knots, which would be about 115, 120 miles per hour. So it's teetering on a Category 3, but it's not quite there yet. It doesn't look like. But by 11, when the Hurricane Center puts out its advisory, if we see a Category 3, I wouldn't be totally surprised.
But right now it is a Category 2 as of the 8 a.m. observation. It was centered at 25.9 north, 85.1 west, or 415 miles southeast of New Orleans. As Doctor mentioned, top winds 105 miles per hour. It continues to move in that west-northwesterly path, which it hasn't deviated from much ever since it became a tropical storm way back when off the coast of Africa. So it continues to move west-northwest at 10. Central pressure 974 millibars. Now, the hurricane watches are posted over the northern Gulf. That's the area of most concern. From St. Marks, Florida, over to Morgan City, Louisiana, hurricane watch in effect. And the Hurricane Center made mention that the fact that they may have to upgrade a portion of that to hurricane warnings later today or tonight, which of course in a warning scenario means that hurricane conditions may be felt within 24 hours on the coastal region. So that's what we're going to be watching very carefully. Looks like most of the significant winds, though, have now moved off the coast, west coast of Florida for the most part, and are out over the open waters of the Gulf.
That's true, other than the dry tortugas that are still getting gale force winds out of the south-southeast here at just a few hours ago. Most of the strong wind is out over the Gulf.
But it's still a little squally, as we can see on the radar out of the South Florida region, the rain extending from the Key West area up through western, well, the sun coast of Florida up towards Sarasota and Bradenton and Fort Myers and Naples. Some heavy ones offshore right now, but improving weather for the upper and middle Keys at present.
That is correct.
As we look at the situation now, the satellite once again, it's taking on that classic buzzsaw shape, but it's moving into a little bit of dry air. We'll be discussing about where that may be heading over the next 24 to 48 hours in just a moment, but we're going to be heading up to the Gulf Coast of Florida, to Pensacola Beach specifically. The Weather Channel's Kristen Dodd arrived there yesterday to report on preparations, and is there as sunrises this morning? Kristen, what's the situation in Pensacola this morning?
Well, continue to get prepared. That is the word here across Pensacola, as many of the residents are going to be using today to board up their homes and evacuate. We are under evacuation orders here for the barrier islands. Let's take a look at who that includes. We have Escambia County, Santa Rosa County, also Okaloosa County, as well as Walton County. All of these areas are under an evacuation order for the coastal communities and also the low-lying areas, as well as residents of mobile homes. Yesterday we were out and about in some of the area hardware stores. A lot of folks were buying up the lumber, and they have been putting it to pretty good use, including this building behind me, which is a bank that's located here right along the coast here on the beach at Pensacola Beach. They have already been boarding up those windows, and many of the area hotels have also boarded up. At this point, I believe almost all of the hotels, at least along Pensacola Beach, have now closed, and they have boarded up, so all the tourists are now leaving the area this morning. More than likely, the residents will be following them. Now, beginning at 1 o'clock local time at Navarre Beach, the Santa Rosa County Sheriff's Office will be going door to door to remind people that they are under an evacuation and to encourage them to be getting off the island. Again, that is going to be happening at 1 o'clock. They would like all the residents off before sunset tonight. Back to you, Bruce.
Thanks very much. Kristen Dunn reporting live from Pensacola Beach, Florida. We'll be checking back with Kristen for further updates throughout the course of the morning. But right now we turn back to Dr. Lyons. And Dr. Lyons, you observed something with the infrared satellite picture that looks rather interesting.
Yeah, this is temporary, and it's over the Gulf of Mexico and won't directly affect you, but over the long haul it will. And you can see this very intense area of thunderstorms to the north. On the very short time scale, we often see the center of the circulation tend to migrate toward the deepest thunderstorm activity, and that's what we're seeing right now. You notice the eye center is moving ever so slightly more northward than it was before into that deep convection. That may not persist, of course. You don't want to bite off on that on the long term. The track is still up generally in this area, but the temporary wobble is taking a little more north, which of course on the long haul takes that wiggly track just ever so slightly a little more to the east.
Well, let's look at the influence that may eventually steer George to one particular point on the coast.
Yeah, we've been monitoring the surface ridge of high pressure and the ridge of high pressure all the way up through about the mid part of the atmosphere, 500 millibars or about 18,000 feet. And how far east that ridge moves will be critical on how far west the hurricane goes. As that ridge recedes, if it does, the hurricane may be allowed to come more northward. If it stays put in here, that will force the hurricane farther to the west. And so those two players there in the trough to the farther off to the west are very important.
So we're looking at the projected path, and again, we're in a time frame where we would talk about landfall perhaps Monday morning right now, but of course we give you the old caveat that this is subject to change depending upon it could slow down, it could speed up. But we're looking for a growing hurricane here, and if it would take the path towards New Orleans, that could be fairly disastrous, couldn't it?
That's right. We're really worried about a path toward the northwest that would take the right front quadrant of the hurricane into the New Orleans area, because here's an example of the maximum water levels you could see in the general vicinity of New Orleans. And you can see that Category 1 up to 10 feet, but Category 3, Category 4, we're talking 20 feet, even upwards to 30 feet on the ocean side of that area. So very big storm surge is possible there.
Even prior to that, they'd have a sustained, probably east to southeasterly wind flow. They're just piling the water back up into the rivers.
That's correct. And of course, if it slows down there, we could get a lot of rainfall on top of it, which would exacerbate the problem.
Well, that's a worst case scenario. That's not a forecast.
Good morning and welcome to Weather Center. I'm Cheryl Lemke. We're keeping an eye on Hurricane George this morning, and more severe weather today too in the upper Midwest and the northern Great Lakes. But first, an update on George. Right now, the hurricane is making its way through the Gulf of Mexico, and some residents along the Gulf are taking no chances on which way the storm is headed. For the very latest on the storm's direction, we turn to Bruce Edwards and Dr. Steve Lyons in the Forecast Center. Good morning, Bruce.
Good morning, Cheryl, and good morning, everyone. Well, George is in the Gulf. It's not bothering anyone at this point in time, but it will very shortly, within the next day or so. It's going to be wreaking some havoc in parts of the Gulf Coast. Dr. Steve Lyons joins us now, and we're starting to get some of the visible satellite pictures, so we want to show someone that looks like a real pimple here. This is the satellite, a close-up look at the center of our hurricane out there.
That's right. The circulation center, of course, is right in this area that looks dark, and you can see the eye wall is over here, and look at those overshooting tops of thunderstorms. The sun's over this way, and it's casting shadows to on the west side, which is this side of those high thunderstorms. That's helping to fuel that circulation and potentially make it a little bit stronger here over the next 6 hours.
We'll show you some other satellite pictures in a few moments that gives you a better view of that. at a different, wider angle view of that. But here's the latest observation from the Hurricane Center as of 8 a.m. George was centered at 25.9 north, 85.1 west, or approximately 415 miles southeast of New Orleans. Its maximum sustained winds 105 miles an hour. That is a Category 2 hurricane, very close to Category 3. And conditions are favorable for some additional strengthening later on today over the Gulf waters. It continues to move in its path of west-northwesterly direction at about 10 miles per hour, and with just minor deviations. That's pretty much been the direction of movement ever since George was conceived way out in the air in the Atlantic Ocean. As you can see way back and through here, it hadn't deviated much from that overall path, and central pressure 974 millibars. Now, there are hurricane watches out across the actually one hurricane watch on the northern Gulf from St. Marks, Florida, right here around Appalachia Bay, to Morgan City, Louisiana. This entire area under a hurricane watch. All the tropical storm warnings and watches for the Florida Peninsula have been dropped as of the earlier advisory, but small craft are advised to keep the dinghy in the dock. Don't move it away because the Gulf is still pretty angry, and just offshore there are tropical storm force winds out there.
They sure are, Bruce, and very high seas. Measurements at some of the buoy observation sites 22 feet or higher.
We can look at the field of winds if we can very quickly. You can see once again there they are, and they extend well out away from the center of the hurricane.
Yeah, the tropical storm force wind radius has expanded in time. Most of the cloud signature that you're seeing is really around the hurricane force winds. So this is a very potent system, and of course the dry Tortugas has still got gale force winds there and some shower activity.
We take a look at the radar out of the region, and there's still some pretty significant bands of storms out closer to the center, which is off to the left side of the screen.
Yeah, these areas out in here are major marine hazards, so don't venture out there unless you're a very large vessel, and if you are, be very prepared for some severe weather and nasty thunderstorm activity.
And we're seeing some radar echoes even off the east coast of Florida at the present time. It had died off considerably, but still a few thunderstorms are indeed possible with that broad circulation.
That's right, and you can see the extent of the circulation. The center's way back over here off the screen, but the interesting thing to keep in mind here is as this warm tropical air comes up over Florida with surface heating, we could see more thunderstorms develop over the central peninsula later today.
Well, we're going to be watching and, of course, very interested in the path and the movement of Hurricane George, and it's destined to make landfall somewhere along the Gulf Coast. Well, up in Pensacola Beach, Florida, the Weather Channel's Kristen Dodd is on guard, on duty, watching as folks prepare for the arrival of George, if that indeed happens. Kristen, what's it like this morning as the sun's coming up there?
Well, the sun is out, but we have seen some increase in the cloud cover as we pan off. Some of these clouds just passed overhead about 15 or 20 minutes ago, and those are the leading edge of some of the clouds that are wrapping around Hurricane George. We still are seeing kind of a brisk easterly wind, but nothing too unusual for the beaches during the early morning hours. Through the afternoon and overnight and tomorrow, we do expect these clouds to thicken, the waves increase as George makes an approach to the Gulf Coast. Because of all of this, we do have evacuation orders to pass along to you for the barrier islands, not only for 4 counties in Florida, but also for Alabama. Baldwin County in Alabama, including the Gulf Shores area, is under an evacuation order. Also here in Florida, Escambia County, as well as Santa Rosa, Okaloosa, and also Walton County. Not only just the coast, but also the low-lying interior areas. If you are in a flood-prone area, you also need to be evacuating. So today is the day to be boarding up and heading out. Back to you, Bruce.
All right, good advice. Thank you, Kristen Dodd, reporting from Pensacola Beach. Kristen will have continuous reports for us throughout the course of the day today to let us know how things are shaping up. Now, as we look at the color-enhanced satellite, Dr. Lyons, big thunderstorms forming on the north side, and this is taking on a more organized configuration this morning.
Yeah, it has, and we see that is not 2 eyes there. It's just temporarily some cirrus covering the primary eye there. That'll go away, and the primary eye will come right back. And we'll see that later on the visible satellite imagery a little more clearly.
Here's the water vapor imagery, shows where the moisture is, and we can see some features a little more clearly on this black and white, and it shows what may definitely influence the future path of George.
That's correct, Bruce. Right in here, this delineation line here is the demarcator of where we think the direction will go relative to the storm itself. So it's generally up in this direction somewhere. And the real trick is whether or not this ridge of high pressure in this dark zone is going to shift to the east. If it shifts to the east, the storm will take a more northward track. If it does not shift to the east, it will continue on its current track, and right now that's our best guesstimate, pretty much on its current track or a little bit northward of the tail end.
And we can see where the projected path is, and we just want to reiterate that it is a strong Category 2 hurricane right now. Any slight increase in strength will push it up to Category 3. And then it'll still have plenty of time to even get a little stronger if it indeed is the case.
That's right, and one thing to keep in mind here, it's only moving 10 miles an hour, so it has a long time before it gets there. We're talking really late Monday, early Tuesday morning. And the other thing to keep in mind is if it takes a northward track, it's a lot closer to
Apalachicola there.
Right, than it is to New Orleans. So keep that in mind for your preparations there along the coast here. If it takes a due north track, it's closer.
And as we always mention that you're going to feel tropical storm force winds well out ahead of where the center is, and hurricane force winds again. So conditions will go downhill a long time before that center comes near shore.
That's right. Tropical storm force winds could extend out probably 12 to 24 hours depending on where you are located.
All right, thank you, Dr. Steve Lyons, for the latest information. We will invite you to join us often here on the Weather Channel. We'll have updates, complete updates on the hour and the half hour, and you can pick out weather information on the tropics or your backyard weather anytime on the internet at weather.net.
Hurricane George continues to be a real threat in the Gulf of Mexico. It's kicking up winds and creating dangerous surf for the Florida's west coast.
That's right, Cheryl. Here's a live look at that surf that is continuing to pound the shoreline here. I'm Kristen Dodd, and I'll have a live report from Pensacola Beach coming up.
Good morning and welcome to Weather Center. I'm Cheryl Lemke. Now we'll be hearing back from Kristen in just a moment. Elsewhere though in the country, the southern plain states continue to be very hot. And in the Midwest, severe weather could be a problem today. And I'll have more about that coming up in just a minute. But first of all, let's turn to Bruce Edwards in our forecast center for the very latest on Hurricane George. Good morning, Bruce.
Good morning, Cheryl, and good morning, everyone. Indeed, we're keeping a close watchful eye on Hurricane George. We've got the latest advisories and some changes coming up. Well, I'll tell you, people in the Key West are surveying the damage that was left behind by George. The storm pounded the Florida Keys yesterday. In Key West, it brought the ocean onto the city streets. It downed trees and power lines, as well as destroying houseboats and floating homes. In other words, it was wasting away the land known as Margaritaville. Winds more than 100 miles an hour ripped through the region. Roads were closed, people are without electricity and water, and they have not yet fully assessed the damage from the hurricane. As we take a look at the latest information, here's a close-up satellite picture. You can see the visible satellite picture showing the latest and the greatest information here on Hurricane George. And we have the latest information just out from the National Hurricane Center, just received just a few moments ago. And here is the latest position. George was centered at 26.1 north, 85.6 west, or 385 miles southeast of New Orleans, Louisiana. The maximum sustained winds remain at 105 miles per hour. It is continuing to move west-northwest. It's picked up its forward speed just a tad up to 12 miles per hour. And the maximum sustained winds, as I mentioned, 105. That's still a Category 2 hurricane. Central pressure holds steady at 974 millibars. But once again, this is a very dangerous Category 2 hurricane and is capable of increasing in strength through the course of the afternoon. Now we have a look. The changes I spoke of are in the watches and warnings category. Now here are the particulars. Here you can see where we had the hurricane watch. We have an update for you. Now the National Hurricane Center has issued a hurricane warning from Morgan City, Louisiana, east to Panama City, Florida. That is a hurricane warning from Morgan City, Louisiana to Panama City, Florida. Now that means that hurricane conditions are expected in the warned area within 24 hours. Preparations should be underway to protect life and property. Now, also a hurricane watch has been placed in effect from Morgan City, Louisiana west to Intercoastal City, Louisiana. So that's an extension of the hurricane watch over central portions of Louisiana. So a change in the watches and warnings. We'll have those all updated for you very shortly. Now, as We go as the call for the evacuations have gone out in the Florida Panhandle. Residents are boarding up in preparation for Hurricane George. One man, however, said he's not sticking around if things get any worse.
We're going to leave. If it gets in the Gulf and looks like it's heading this direction, I'm gone.
Well, that man certainly has the right idea. Anyone in the path of George should make plans to get out of its way immediately. Now, in that path, in that area that has just been placed under a hurricane warning, the Weather Channel's Kristen Dodd has been positioned at Pensacola Beach, Florida. And Kristen, you're now in the hurricane-warned area. Do you think that'll have an impact on how the evacuations go this afternoon?
I certainly hope so, because we are seeing a lot of folks begin to take this a little bit lightly. We are under evacuation orders, but as you can see here on the beach, a lot of folks have come out to enjoy the beautiful sunshine and a day at the beach. Hopefully they have already boarded up, because again, we are under evacuation orders here in Escambia County, Santa Rosa County, Okaloosa County, as well as in Martin County, not only for just the coastal communities, but also for the low-lying areas, as well as residents of mobile homes. One of the big concerns here with the landfalling hurricane is the winds, of course, but also potential for storm surge. These are barrier islands, so they're low-lying areas, and they really could be impacted. Case in point was Hurricane Opal when it came through in 1995. A 15-foot high wall of water took out buildings and also the dunes, and those dunes behind me still are very weakened. Residents here tell me that they're just now beginning to have the sea oats grow back and the grass begin to take hold. They would hate to see these dunes take another hit. Unfortunately, because those dunes are in a weakened state, any type of storm surge that comes into this area could do more damage. Bruce?
Thanks very much, Kristen Dodd, live in Pensacola Beach, Florida, which that region, again, from Panama City, Florida, westbound to Morgan City, Louisiana, has just been placed under a hurricane warning, meaning hurricane conditions can be felt along the coast within the next 24 hours. Dr. Steve Lyons, our hurricane specialist, joins us this morning now. So as we had anticipated and as was hinted by the forecast of the Hurricane Center, that the warning's now posted along the coast, and this hurricane continues to stay well organized.
It sure does, and now it's taking a track pretty close to the general area of the Biloxi, New Orleans area in here. That's the highest area of risk right now, although of course the warnings extend on either side there. But keep in mind, anybody in the warning area should expect hurricane force winds. The reason that's as wide as it is because the radius of hurricane force winds is wide and our uncertainty is there as well. But one thing to keep in mind here, here's the hurricane center here. Most all of the hurricane force winds are on the eastern side of the hurricane. We've said all along that's very asymmetric. And so that makes all of the track along here, the eastern side of the track at the eye and eastward, the most dangerous side.
Yeah, just like someone throwing a roundhouse right. You might maybe lead with the jab on the left, but the roundhouse right comes in. That's got all the power in it.
Exactly. So don't be preoccupied with the center location.
All right, we look at those wind and the wind field here, and we can see once again quite a tropical storm force winds are going to be felt long before that center really gets anywhere near the coast.
That's right, and of course this graphic was from our previous advisory information. The latest reconnaissance when it indicate that the hurricane force winds are only on the northeastern side. No hurricane force winds on the western side. Now that can change as the hurricane intensifies as it moves to the northwest, but right now it's only on the northeast side.
Well, we look at the water vapor imagery to see what factors may influence its eventual path.
Again, we've been looking at this trough over here to the west. It's forecast to come in. That should block it from Florida.
Or from Texas.
From Texas, sorry. And keep it basically from the Louisiana coast eastward. One caveat here, though, as it comes north, it's forecast to stall or become moving very slowly here, and that would cause potential for very heavy rain.
Yeah, that's indeed the case. It's had a history of heavy rain over the mountainous areas of the islands when it came through, with 20 inches or more of rain reported in, let's see, Cuba and in parts of Hispaniola.
That's right, and we're...
I know people like to plan ahead for their day. I can help you out. Right now, it's your local forecast on the Weather Channel.
morning. It's time now for Storm Watch. The big weather story is still Hurricane George, which continues to loom ominously in the eastern Gulf. At the same time, though, we've been tracking some rather mean thunderstorms rumbling over portions of the upper Midwest, and we'll say more about those storms coming up in a minute. First of all, though, let's check out the tropical update. It's been an extremely active weather pattern for the tropics, unusually so, in fact, because at this point, we have 4 hurricanes to talk about. That's right, 4 hurricanes. And that's the first time that we have had 4 hurricanes at one time since 1893, so a long time ago. Well, first of all, we have Hurricane George, of course, and then we have Hurricane Ivan and Karl out across the Atlantic basin. Then also upstream from there, we have Hurricane Jeanne. And we'll say more about those systems coming up in just a few moments. But first of all, Hurricane George. Again, a very powerful hurricane, still classified as a Category 2 hurricane, but further strengthening is probable today because we are still seeing some very warm ocean waters, very warm waters right over the Gulf of Mexico, so conditions do look favorable for further strengthening to be taking place. Right now, the system is pulling off towards the west-northwest, and it's roughly centered about 385 miles southeast of New Orleans. Now, we do expect it to continue to more or less track off towards the west-northwest, perhaps a little bit more towards the northwest, and that means the highest strike probability right across the northern Gulf. And especially so in this area, we have hurricane warnings that have been posted from Panama City, Florida, and running westbound towards Morgan City, Louisiana. Then flanking that area, we have hurricane watches in effect. Now remember, a hurricane warning means hurricane conditions are likely sometime within the next 24 hours. So this does include those of you in Pascagoula and Mobile Bay, even back over towards New Orleans. You will likely experience hurricane force winds sometime within the next 24 hours. So the weather definitely going downhill as Hurricane George continues to draw closer. Again, right now it's lurking across the eastern Gulf. Still a very well-developed hurricane, though, and we are still seeing some of the strongest winds over the eastern semicircle right here just to the east of the center of circulation. And again, those strong winds and the heavy rain should be lifting off towards the west, northwest, or northwest later on today. We're still seeing some outer fringe bands, though, outer feeder bands, though, coming in across southwestern Florida. And there's still that chance for maybe some localized flooding, especially for coastal communities around Lee and Collier counties in southwestern Florida. Now, besides Hurricane George, we're also keeping close tabs on Hurricane Karl. Right now, packing winds of 85 miles per hour. Luckily, though, it's not posing any threat to any land areas. But Hurricane Ivan may perhaps bring some hurricane-like conditions eventually towards the Azores a little bit later this weekend. And then we have Hurricane Jeanne, packing winds of 75 miles per hour, a minimal hurricane. And luckily with this system, too, it's not posing any threat to any land areas. Here's a satellite perspective of Africa, and again, here's Hurricane Jeanne lifting off towards the northeast. And as we check out the current weather map, again, we are still focusing in on Hurricane George right here. But besides that, we're also watching very closely what's happening in the upper Midwest. A very complex low-pressure system continues to get better organized, and as it feeds on moisture feeding northward from the Gulf, and along with that a strong jet stream slicing through this region, looks as if the weather ingredients are coming together for perhaps a big outbreak of severe weather. From around Omaha and Lincoln, back towards Des Moines, Iowa, even over towards Green Bay, and right around Saginaw Bay, it could be very stormy for today. And already we do have a severe thunderstorm warning out for the area right around Sturgeon Bay. Right around Door County, you are under a severe thunderstorm warning, so now is the time to take cover because we're having some nasty thunderstorms moving through. We'll have a live report on Hurricane George coming up in just a moment.
Tropical weather systems are affected by so many very